Motion to approve? Second? Excuse PJ Keeler, Bill Price, Kevin Robert, and Chris Teo. Under disciplinary action, Ally Fato from Brooklyn. EMT has a certification suspended effective 11/8 and was assessed a civil penalty of $2,000. Of that amount, $1,000 is suspended for violations of Part 800.16 and 800.3. Under course applications, informational, EMT refresher, Saratoga County EMS location, Malta Stillwater, starts January 2nd of 2017. EMS refresher for Greene County, location is Tannersville, which starts January 2nd of 2017. EMT original, Saratoga County EMS location, Clifton Park Half Moon, starts 1/5/17. And Saratoga County EMS Council location, Malta Stillwater, starts January 9th, 2017. Report of committees. Tim, executive committee.
I apologize, so I'm sitting in the back of the room tonight. When the meeting runs late, I have to leave about 8:45, so I don't want to interrupt anybody. But hopefully everybody has a copy of my executive director's report. Most of these items on there are routine, but there are two items I'd like to bring to everyone's attention. The first bullet point, back in September, we received our usual Marvin and Company engagement letter to conduct the annual audit. In that engagement letter, they quoted a price for this year's audit of $16,800, which I think is a couple $1,000s above what the audit was the previous year. At that meeting, I was instructed by the executive board to create some RFPs, or create an RFP and circulate it to regional accounting and auditing firms to see if anybody would be interested in to submit a proposal to us and hopefully get a proposal that would be a little bit less than that. So I took it upon myself to create the document. I sent it to a number of local auditors, including auditors that were familiar with New York State program agencies. I talked to one of my comrades in Central New York, and they gave me the name of an agency. Long story short, I created a timeline. I also included a penalty clause for a late audit. If you remember, last year our audit dragged on about 2 months longer than it usually does. The deadline for submittals was today, 4 p.m. today. One proposal showed up from Teal, Becker, and Shamani, a local auditor. They quoted a price $1,200 over Marvin's price, $18,000. Interestingly enough, Marvin and Company did receive one of the RFPs too, and they elected to bow out this year. So we have a couple options on the plate. One of them is to entertain Teal, Becker, and Shamani's price and move forward. Another one is to go back to the drawing board, perhaps retreat that, can't say it, the RFP a little bit and send it out. And prior to today, I did personally call a number of other agencies I didn't contact the first time around to see if they'd be interested in receiving an RFP. And we do have agencies out there that are interested. The other option is to recontact Teal, Becker, and Shamani and see if they'd be interested in sharpening that pencil a little bit more. And we may have somebody that can help us tonight in the House, Steve Retzlaff from Empire Ambulance. The company does business with the same company. So Steve graciously agreed to step up to the plate to see if he could wield a little influence there. I will keep everybody posted as to how this proceeds and which way we decide to go in the future, because that audit is important for us as a program agency and a regional council to stay in business and conduct business with the state. The last item of note I'd like to talk about briefly is one of the last bullet points relative to certificate of needs. And perhaps I could draw on Delegate Aidan O'Connor to help us out with this. Town of Lexington Municipal Operating Certificate expires. It expires the first week of January. 10 weeks ago, I contacted Supervisor Berger to remind him that that certificate he needs to start working on. He acknowledged it. I've been in constant touch with him basically for the last 8 or 9 weeks. Work isn't proceeding as fast as I'd like to see it. That application should have been in our hands probably about a month ago. he understands the time sensitivity of this and the deadline. Anything I do with him, I keep our con members or committee members in the loop. I keep the state and Dan Clayton and Joe Farrell in the loop too. So we're making every effort with Lexington to get that application in. Perhaps, Aiden, if you know anybody down there, if you do know Supervisor Berger, you could
Yeah, we were just in meetings together this past week, and
extend him the importance of getting that in. If he does, we as a Remsco can't grant an extension, but the state can grant an extension under, and I forget the acronym, but if he gets a completed app in prior to January 8th, and I emphasize completed, it will buy them time, and our committee can review that and ultimately approve it. I emphasize completed though, so he understands that. I personally spoke with him about it. We had about a 1-hour conference call where I walked him through basically step by step the CON process. So the only thing we need now from them is a completed application.
did they reference anything about giving it up?
No, sir, not to me, no. So that would conclude my report, unless anybody has any questions relative to any of the other bullet points I have on there. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Treasurer report, PJ is excused. Finance committee, Steve?
But you do have the written treasurer's report for everybody, right? Everyone's at the door. Okay, so there are a number of things from the Finance Committee tonight we'd like to bring forward. The Finance Committee met on November 7th to review our investment portfolio with our financial advisor, which is Jim Watkinson of RBC Wealth Management. There are a number of actions we wanted to describe tonight and take going forward. Because one of the things that's noted is Remo keeps a considerable amount of its assets in cash. If you look at the treasurer's report, we have roughly $400,000 that's in cash that earns a negligible or no interest whatsoever, and we have somewhere around 200 to 300 to about 200 something thousand dollars in an investment portfolio. Actually, 288,000 in an investment portfolio. So one of our goals for this year was to review our investment policy statement that was formed in 2010, and then to have an investment strategy to move forward in trying to put some of that money to work to earn some money for us. So the first step was to do a new investment policy statement. So we met and reviewed the statement put class of 2010. I'd like to just review the features of that with everybody today, tell you what has been changed, and then ask for approval for us to put this investment policy statement in place for the future. So essentially what an investment policy statement does, it sets up guidelines for the kind of risk you want to take when you do investing. So how much risk tolerance you have, how secure you want your funds to be, and of course there's, for every decision there's a trade-off. So a very risky portfolio could earn you more money, a less risky portfolio will make sure that your principal is secure, but you're going to earn less on it. So we went forward, and we believe that the investment policy statement that we had in 2010 is still a prudent and acceptable investment policy, and I'm going to give a little bit of a summary of that at this time. We have a target return rate of 7% a year. That's an ambitious return rate, certainly, but there's no reason not to have an ambitious return rate. And we use a 3-year basis to evaluate our portfolio. We've acknowledged as part of the statement that our biggest cash need is that at times it is possible that the state reimbursement to us does not flow as fast as we'd like it to. So we have to keep liquidity in case state vouchers don't get paid as fast as we'd like them to. Other than that, we didn't see any short-term liabilities or long-term liabilities. We have authorized in the investment policy statement to invest in keeping things in cash, in other words, the bank, fixed income, meaning bonds, stocks, which are equities, or mutual funds. We had been using an instrument in the past that we have removed from the investment policy statement called exchange-traded funds. Exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, are when you can buy a group of stocks as an index. And instead of buying individual stocks, that's generally meant for people that are small investors that don't have a lot of money, where you want to be in the equities market, but you don't want to buy the actual stock. You buy a fund that owns a group of stocks. Given the size of our investment portfolio, the decision was that was not a prudent investment anymore for us. We then set some corridors for how we would do our investing, and we have a target for our allocation of assets. That 25% of our money would be in cash, 50% of our money would be in fixed income, and 25%, which is like bonds, and 25% in equities, which is like stocks. We set that goal to make sure that we sort of keep ourselves stable. We also have excluded any investments in international bonds or international stocks. In other words, we're not going to buy something on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, or we're not going to buy bonds in, say, the City of London transit system. And so our investment policy has us working domestic. We believe that when we go out to buy bonds, that the funds we buy need to have been in existence for at least 3 years. They should have been managed by the same individuals for at least 3 years, and they should perform in the top 40% of their category. In other words, we want to make sure that we're buying high-quality products. We won't go below AA rating on a bond. We will not buy a bond that has a maturity of more than 20 years, and that a maximum of 10% of our portfolio could be put into any one bond. In other words, you don't want to throw all your eggs into one basket. So we wouldn't buy, there wouldn't be, we wouldn't take our whole portfolio and put them into one transaction. Similarly, on the equity side, we would not invest in any company that has a capitalization of less than $1 billion, a maximum of 10% of our portfolio in any one equity, and that we would not invest more than 15% of our investments in any one industry. In other words, if we were investing in, restaurants, we wouldn't put more than we wouldn't buy 10% of our portfolio in one restaurant company, 10% in another. We want to be more diverse than that. We have placed one social policy on in 2010 that we continue, which there'd be no investments in companies that sell alcohol, tobacco, or firearms. In addition, our investment policy is reviewed quarterly. In other words, our investments, we get monthly statements, but at least quarterly, the Finance Committee is going to review the statements for updating. So that's the basic tenets of the current investment policy. It's available in draft form if anybody would actually like to read it. I'd be glad to send it to anybody by email that wants to read it. But we would like the board to endorse continuing this investment policy that we've had in place, with the one exception, which is the eliminating the use of the ETF funds. So I would bring that forward for consideration.
Motion.
And I'll second that. Very well put, Steve.
I'm glad to answer any questions.
In terms of that 7% return, is that something that we've realized, or what do we realize?
No, this market is not, there's no return of that available unless you're going to be an extraordinarily risky transactions. I mean, the market is not, the economy is not growing at that rate at this time.
So just from an overall perspective, even though I guess you described that we do have a significant, if that's a correct description, amount of money in cash that's essentially sitting in the bank, it's certainly not losing any money, and from the report that's before us, it would appear that we've actually lost money by investing as we had. So it would seem the most conservative approach would be to leave it in cash at this point.
I'm sorry, why do you think we've lost money?
The page 1 of the statement shows a loss of $4,300.
Well, yeah, but that's a monthly, the market fluctuates on a month-to-month basis. Investments don't, you have to look at the return of an investment portfolio over time to gauge its productivity, not its month-to-month performance. That's why we look at over a 3-year average.
Okay, well, maybe that would be a follow-up question then, and again, I don't necessarily need it this evening, but if our goal was 7%, what was the return that we actually attained for that time period? Or for any time period or reporting period? I mean, I don't know if you guys relook at it annually or...
We certainly look at the the portfolio regularly, and we get regular statements. And so, and what we do is we do a comparison over time. And there are three components that come in. There is interest on some of the investments, there's dividends, and then there's the appreciation or unrealized gain in those investments. Obviously, cash does not have any appreciation. I'd be glad to provide Jim, you with a report that shows a year-by-year appreciation of the investments.
Are we close to 7%? Are we at 1 or 2%?
No, we're
Ballpark.
ballpark midway between.
So we're not at a loss, we haven't.
Yeah, no, we haven't, no, the market, I mean, obviously, the market is at an all-time high. So to the extent we have equities, those equities have performed extraordinarily well. The bonds are more of a stable income, but they're a smaller amount. I'll bring next month for everybody a year-by-year comparison, say, of, maybe the last 3 years of moving average to show you our overall performance, because I don't have all the statements sitting here.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's difficult to tell just from the
Yeah, you can't tell
monthly
for a
treasurer's
monthly
report, right.
I mean, because if you're looking at the monthly treasurer's report, you're looking at the monthly treasurer's report that probably covers the market statement in the month before the election, when the market was jittery, and then if you look at the month after the election, contrary to what everyone thought was gonna happen, the market is rushed upwards in the last couple weeks into record territory. So I'll bring a three-year, I'll do a little chart in Excel that I can hand out to everybody that gives you a 3-year return rate.
Thank you.
The second thing we will, so I guess that's, the motion is out there.
So to decide to change our balancing and stuff, shall we take a look at that report next month and forward it then, or is it something we need to change right now?
We're not changing our balance, all we're doing is we're eliminating the electronic.
I understand when we're talking about changing our percentages of cash from one point, we're gonna have X amount of cash on hand versus a smaller amount of cash on hand.
Well, what I'm asking you to review right now is simply the investment policy statement. I'm not asking for,
Correct, but
Correct.
you want us to go along with it by changing the amount of percentage of cash?
we're not changing it.
Okay.
It's the same, it's keeping it the same, except for eliminating the ETFs.
Okay, I took you to say that you wanted to change the percentages for.
Well, that's
The amount
coming,
you've
but
invested.
that's not the investment policy statement. This is in stages. So first, we want to validate our stakes, this is our process for evaluating investments.
What was the exact motion?
To approve the investment policy statement as I described to the board.
Is there other?
Yeah, you have a motion and a second.
I made the motion, I think. Jim, you seconded?
The other way around, vice versa.
Okay.
Waiting for you to call for a vote.
Motion to approve? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you. Then, now that we can put that in place, the next step that we would like to take is the committee, with the guidance of our Jim Watkinson, would like to recommend moving about $100,000 of our cash into investments. So right now, at the time the committee met on November 7th, we had $388,000 in cash. That earned it earns 1 basis point. In other words, it earns less than 1/10 of 1%. It sits as cash. We carry more than a year's cash on hand. In other words, if Remo were to have no income, we could operate Remo for over a year just on cash. If you take the value of all of our investments, we could operate Remo for about 2 years on the investments in cash. And of course, the investments can be liquidated if necessary. We believe that we could move, and this is a motion that comes out of the Finance Committee, which is Kevin Robert, myself, and PJ Keeler, reduce our cash from $388,000, actually, as of today, it's $400,000 because of what today's report, put $100,000 into investments. That would leave us with 270 days or 9 months cash on hand, which is an extraordinary large amount of cash on hand for an ongoing business, meaning that we would, if we were to have to operate with no revenue for 9 months, sometime at the end of that 9 months, we would have to liquidate a investment in order to pay our bills. That's an extraordinarily good cash position to be in. One of the things that has happened in 2010, when this investment policy focus was brought forward, we were in a time when it was considered at the state level that they would defund the Remscos, that they would no longer be funding the 17 program agencies. And so the executive committee at that time's mission was to say, if we have to sustain ourselves without any state funding, how are we gonna do it? And that's when there was a lot of focus put on education and some of the other programming that we're doing that earns money for us. Now we're in a different time, and I think when we get to the talk about the strategic discussion, you know, about what happened at the executive committee retreat, there's no longer or at least not currently, the focus of the state on saying we don't want to fund the Remscos. So it gives us an opportunity to invest in projects. So the fact that we have got a lot of retained income means we can invest in things. And certainly, you know, over the last couple months, there have been a number of things that were approved here, like Mission Lifeline, and you know, the money that's been spent on putting the modems in the life packs is, you know, just a couple examples. But we think keeping 9 months or 270 days of cash on hand is a pretty good place to be. So the committee would like to move approximately $100,000 of current cash into the investment portfolio. Last year, we moved $80,000 into the investment portfolio in the form of bonds. So we went into the most stable form of investment. Our investment advisor's goal for us is to balance having stable funds, and which like bonds, and equities. His recommendation to us is that we make an investment in high-quality equities, which are, in other words, large stocks that have dividends, high-performing large stocks with dividends, and that we move $100,000 in. He has prepared a portfolio of investments for us. That's, again, something that would be available for everybody to look at, and we could email that proposal to anybody. But I think the next step for the committee is to ask for approval to move $100,000 from cash into our investment funds, into high-performance equities. We can either do that tonight, or we can do it at some other point in time, depending on what kind of discussion people want to have and what kind of questions people have. But that's the recommendation from the committee. And you know, this usually, one of the things is, this is something generally in the past that's been handled at the executive committee level, but as we've talked about over the last couple of meetings, we're not doing these things at the executive committee anymore, because we want this to be something that everybody gets a chance to participate in. So it's kind of a new thing to be bringing in this way. And so one of the things we talked about in the executive committee is exactly how to do it. I don't think you want us to go through every single thing line by line. On the other hand, we want to make sure people have information that makes them comfortable in participating in decisions. So we'll take the lead, I think, from everybody in exactly the right way to do that.
Was the committee unanimous in their agreement on this?
Yes.
I don't know, just for discussion, I mean, personally, I would rather see some kind of a comprehensive report on where our monies are currently invested, what the individual returns have been on those particular investments. And again, if the financial committee is asking for, you know, our input, it would be nice to have more of a firm foundation on what we've invested in and what we've gotten back before we commit essentially 25% of, you know, our cash available to
Jim, we get a fairly regular report from these guys. And they come and they hand us a very nice bound report.
I mean, I have it all right here, I just don't have it broken down in a report.
So it's not as though this is something that's coming out of the blue. This is something that's coming from our investment committee. It's asking us to continue to move forward, working with somebody who gives us a very in-depth report once a year. I don't see that Steve's doing anything unreasonable here at all. Continue to advance the agenda.
No, and again, maybe my comment was taken off from what my intent was, and that was that in the past, as Steve referenced, those reports may have been given to the executive board, and that information never trickled down, at least not in that comprehensive I guess, format to the regional council.
Maybe we could get them sent to us before the meeting, so we can actually have time to read them and prep and have questions for you if we have them. It might go a lot smoother that way.
Well, you want us to send you the monthly statements?
That would be fine.
I mean, with all due respect, that's what your finance committee is for. Maybe you want to join the finance committee. If we want to send the entire
Or
regional
send us a
council all the
synopsis.
monthly statements, I think you're sort of getting, then you don't need a finance committee because we're all the finance committee. So, I mean, if you personally want to get them, I think we can send them to you, but I don't know if everyone here wants to get all the statements every month.
I think what Jim's getting at is if you want us to vote on it and make an informed decision, we have to have some information to make a decision.
Right, and what I'm trying to get to is what the right level of information is. I don't think everybody wants to get everything every month. That's
I'm not sure
my
everybody-
job, right?
I'm not sure everybody feels the same need that Jim might
Right,
feel,
so,
so.
Well, I'm just saying from a, and I'll just use the financial report, or whatever you wanna call it, the treasurer's report. Every month we get that, and that shows that. I don't think it would be inappropriate to, at least on an annual basis, to have the finance committee or the investment folks provide us
Right.
with a summary of what we've invested in, what the return has been.
Jim comes once a year and presents to us.
And everyone gets
To
copies.
this meeting,
And
he comes to this
so-
meeting and offers to
I
answer.
mean, Jim, if your idea is you would want a quarterly update, I mean, between myself and the committee members, we could put together a one-page piece of paper that says, this is what the quarter looked like at the beginning, this is what the quarter looked like at the end. Probably Jim Watkinson would even put it together for us. But, I don't think you want us to give you, this bound book of, 30 or 40 pages for the whole committee. If there's any one person who really wants to see all the detail, we'll be glad to share all the detail. But I just don't want to, take our whole investment thing and just make 60 copies of, or 30 copies of it and send it out unless it's
It would
valuable.
seem to me a nice balance might be a quarterly, one-page summation of, a spreadsheet that just
Right.
shows kind of just where the investments are and what the return
Percent of
is.
the return and what percentage are we at, or
Yeah,
how
and
close are we to
just,
7%?
yeah, just the
Okay.
basics, and then annually what he's been giving us in the past is fine, and so then when the finance committee asks for these things, at least,
Right.
at least we're,
Right.
somewhat intelligently voting on these things.
So why don't I work with Jim to prepare a quarterly report? We'll have the first one at our next meeting. That'll trend back a couple years to show our performance of our portfolio. Then we'll update it on a quarterly basis, and we don't even have to go over it line by line. It could become part of the treasurer's report where people can ask questions if they have it. The statements are still available to everybody at any time. We should hold off on making any, there's no imperative on making this investment change tonight, in that this money's been in cash for a whole year. 1 month or 2 months doesn't change anything. And frankly, the market is still kind of volatile. It might be interesting to see what happens once January 20th hits. Would that be an acceptable outcome?
What would he do with that $100,000 if you moved it into, you just said investments?
Well, we have a investment, so what he's done is prepared an equity portfolio report for us. He prepared it on November 7th, that basically talks about what he would do with the $100,000. So he's got it split up among individual holdings, and it lists $100,000, basically we'd be spending, doing some consumer staples, some energy, some finance companies, some healthcare. So we're talking about purchasing stocks like Home Depot, Kraft Heinz, Procter & Gamble, Chevron, HSBC, GlaxoSmithKline.
So he's saying all of it in equities?
Yes, because we just spent 80,000 in bonds, and he wants to balance us back out, because the last time we went out, we did only bonds, and our bond percentage is very high. This equity would put us closer to that thing.
I agree wholeheartedly with the finance committee on this one and with him. I dare say there's nobody sitting at this table that has 9 months, maybe a couple people, but there aren't many people in this room that have 9 months of cash, household operating expenses sitting in their bank account, let alone a year plus. So, for those of you that do, congratulations. So, I'm not one. I make a motion that we do it now. I think it's the smart thing to do. I think it makes sense. I don't think there's a business out there, nonprofit, profit, or otherwise, that would sit with this much cash on hand and not be putting it in investments and giving up on the opportunity to make money on it.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Steve, Smith and Wesson stock is going up.
I did think of that.
Alcohol, tobacco, or firearms.
So, I will have a quarter, we'll design a quarterly statement, for the next meeting for everybody to start looking at. And, again, if anybody wants to see the detailed statements, I believe, Tim, do we get a copy here, you're right, you have a copy here at the office that come to Dave on a regular basis, right?
We get the monthly statement.
Right, yeah. The way it works is, I get, and Kevin gets, and PJ gets duplicate copies of the monthly statements. That's an internal control, so that staff does not have the only copies of the information, so that we're able to monitor performance as a committee, not have documents given to us that could be potentially not fully disclosing everything. So you could always come in here and meet with Dave to see them, or you could call any one of the 3 members of the committee, and we have them. And frankly, the investment advisor, if you want a special report, they can, this is all, in a database, they can run something off if anybody needs it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, medical directors, math and academic committee, Dr. Daly?
No, I don't have anything. Couple of little things I'm gonna mix them all up along the way. The first is, the Division of Pre-Hospital Care at Albany Med has a new physician that you guys will get to meet along the way. Her name is Heidi Cordy. She starts with us after 19 years in New York City. She was one of the first fellows in the Houston Fire Department EMS Fellowship Program and is board certified in emergency medicine and disaster medicine as well. So she's going to be around working with us. She's great. She actually was at Jacoby when I was a medical student, which she likes to point out to me as often as possible. We also will have a fellow starting with us in January, Dr. Donovan. Dr. Donovan is board eligible in emergency medicine and has completed an ultrasound fellowship as well. He's going to be helping us build out some ultrasound components for our pre-hospital program, which should be pretty interesting. We're investigating different ultrasound modalities that we could deploy pre-hospitally. So this could be very, very exciting. Both of these folks will allow us to increase the amount of field work that we can do to support you, and will allow us to continue to expand on the kinds of projects that we've been doing the last number of years. So hopefully this will be something that will be really exciting. A couple of important new projects to talk about. One is something that Remo just wrote a letter of endorsement for, which is a Mission Lifeline Stroke. Mission Lifeline, as you'll remember, has been our project we've been doing for the last year, involving improved care for ST elevation MI. We did a preliminary conversation with some of the folks from Duke who are overseeing the whole national project, and are happy to note that some of our numbers and improvements have been very well received on a national scale. we have longer response times than many folks across the country, which contributes to a recognition or reperfusion time that's a little bit longer than some, but the actual times in emergency departments and times that ultimately equate to door to balloon are shorter than they are in many other places across the country, which is very cool. The project has been a resounding success at bringing these competitor hospitals together in order to better serve the patients of the region, and that's something that we hope to continue to grow from. One project that is going forward a little bit more slowly than we had hoped, but will be starting up, will be our CARES registry, actually joining the National CARES registry. Dean's working hard on that to try to put the pieces in place where hopefully there will not be double work for people. Time will pass, and we'll see if that works. Hopefully it will come together. We're certainly putting a lot of effort in on that. And Tim, Dean, and I did a conference call with Deb Cuffs as well, and the folks from CARES. So hopefully we'll have a better idea of how we're doing with cardiac arrests across the country. But what we're going to need is the hospital end. So we're going to capitalize on what we've done from Mission Lifeline and having STEMI coordinators at each of the hospitals to get those STEMI coordinators to give us follow-up on cardiac arrests that come to each of the hospitals so we can tie it all together and get better data. The Mission Lifeline Stroke Program, we've just put an application in with the New York Health Foundation to see if we can get grant funding to be the first place in the country to do a Mission Lifeline Stroke Program. The goal being to look at how we do with stroke across the region, both recognition and door times for these patients, door to needle time for patients that are TPA eligible, and we'll put a new twist on it, which we'll be talking about next week at the REMAC meeting, and I invite all of you to attend if you're available, which is a regional pathway for endovascular rescue. For patients with endovascular occlusions, where one of the big blood vessels in the head has a clot that's blocking it, there were a couple of papers that came out last year that demonstrate that going in, getting that clot out, and reperfusing the brain in a small subset of patients makes a profound difference in terms of functional recovery. Usually these are patients that are relatively young, patients that were very, very functional before their stroke, and if you take this big, huge clot out of their brain, they do incredibly well. They're a very specific subset of patients. What we're going to investigate and then study is going to be the concept of doing a repatriation project where we will take patients that have gone to hospitals that do not do endovascular stroke care and have them transferred as quickly as possible to Albany Med, where they'll get what's called a CT perfusion scan, where you can see exactly how well perfused the brain is and whether or not there is an area that still can survive if you take that clot out. If the stroke is already completed, there's nothing to be done. Those patients, where there's nothing for us to intervene on, will go back to the hospital that they came from if that hospital has the ability to take care of them. And Dr. Brooks from Ellis has been one of the keys to putting together this meeting for next week, because he and I sat at the Coverdell meeting in Rochester together and talked about how we would do this regionally, because it doesn't make sense for every hospital to have the ability to do this one skill. But we want to make sure that all the patients aren't directed away from other hospitals that can care for them. So this is an exciting process that we'll be able to study with Mission Lifeline Stroke, and would frankly put us on the map as being the first place to do a program like this in the United States. This is being done already in Toronto to some extent, and seems to be effective there, so it'll be interesting to see if we can do it well here. Goal being, like we had with STEMIs, to keep community hospitals and stroke centers with different resources with patients that belong more locally, and to give the ones that will benefit from more specialized care, that specialized care. So put your fingers together, cross them. We've got the grant is in, and hopefully it will work out. We're going to talk about the endovascular process next week anyway. Other things that are going on. The hospital restocking agreement will be reviewed by the nurses committee at its next meeting in probably January. The MAC will also get copies of this, so we can go forward and re-endorse this. It's important for all of the hospitals to continue to be a party to that, and hopefully that will continue to work. I was asked at the last MAC meeting that I did not attend to draft a letter to each hospital saying, please release your ambulance crews as quickly as possible because some of them are parking there too long. I've had individual discussions with nurse managers at some of the hospitals that have been most guilty of this. And the letter is, if it didn't go out yet, is supposed to go out relatively soon. And, let's see, my soliloquy has a couple more parts, sorry. Several of the physicians reviewed the pelvic binders available on the market and reported back at the last meeting that the SAM pelvic binder is the recommended one from a regional perspective. Pelvic binders, as you know, close open pelvic fractures can make a profound difference in the outcome of a patient with a big pelvic fracture. The SAM is being recommended in no small part because that's what's carried by LifeNet, and that way we'll have a continuity of equipment. And other thing is protocols are going forward. We still await the app. Educational development is going on. I'm working on some things. Dr. Fulligar in Syracuse is working on some. He has some other partner physicians that are assisting. And at this point, there will be only one formulary change that agencies will have to make, which is the addition of dexamethasone, which is not an expensive one. So shekel counters will be happy about that. And at the academic committee, at the next meeting, there will be a report on rapid sequence intubation practices that was requested by some members of that committee that Howard has done a survey on, and he will be presenting, or sorry, the information will be presented by Dr. Ushkow at next week's meeting as well. Questions?
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. For the nurses committee, Yvette Severia, who was the chair, has stepped down from the being chair of the committee, so we're looking for another member to do that. So Tim is going to reach out to all of the clinical managers or directors of the regional hospitals to see if they will designate someone to do that. And, hopefully, we will meet in January because there was not a meeting in November. Lynn, membership and nominating and awards committee.
So we've had some additional members volunteer for the committees. Membership committee, myself, Scott, Lynn, Carol Brandt, Maria Walker, Fred Fowler, and Dale Ringenfelter for volunteers. Thank you. Nominating committees, myself, Steve Retzlaff, Aiden O'Connor, James Vina. While we're talking about nominating committee, it is that glorious time of year when we ask you all to think about stepping up and taking a position. The offices of the executive boards, the chairman, the first vice chair, the second vice chair, the secretary, and the treasurer. Though I did jokingly say the treasurer was a lifetime appointment, and my colleagues in the meeting didn't say no. So it's the four of us. If you or someone you know that's on the council is interested in being considered for these positions, again, it's myself, Aiden O'Connor, Jim Vina, Steve Retzlaff. Give one of us a call or an email, and before, say, the first week of January, so we can put together the slate for consideration at the January meeting. The awards committee, myself, Steve, Carol Brandt, Steve Kroll, excuse me, Carol Brandt, Maria Walker, Fred Fowler, and the bylaws committee, myself, Steve Kroll, Anne Marie, Maria Walker, Scott Bowman, Carol Brandt, and Jeff Williams volunteered tonight. There are other committees that could use you know, possibly use some additional help, but I'm not in charge of them, so I don't wanna speak on their behalf. But we are looking for everyone maybe to take on just a little bit in order to contribute. Make it more inclusive than exclusive, so you know what the scoop is. Does anyone have any questions? By January, the awards committee will probably communicate by email, and I have permission from Mr. Mirabili to use his graphics from the banquet as our graphics for the outgoing poster for the nomination of the regional awards. We'll have some information and hopefully flyers for you to take back in January for that. Are there any questions on those committees? Is there anyone here that would like to volunteer for any of those? MCI, UI, Finance, COM? Seeing no hands, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, ma'am. UI committee report, Dean?
We are meeting next week.
Okay. Okay, individual county reports, Brian, for Albany?
I know Steve wants me to say something. I have a lot of stuff going on. I promise at the next meeting, I'll fill you all in. But in the essence of time for everybody, I'm gonna keep it short.
Aiden, Green County?
Good evening, everyone. The Green County Countywide Ambulance Task Force that I spoke about for the last 2.5 years is ongoing, with reducing optimism, but we still have some left. We will be meeting this month with our Phase 2 plan. Our Phase 2 plan does not look good, unfortunately. Like I think many EMS communities within this room, we are seeing an increased cost of pre-hospital medicine, a decrease in reimbursement. We have a huge tax burden because of the fact that we're rural, so we can't rely on a call volume to justify the EMS budget. And unfortunately, this year we have seen the struggles of either decreasing contribution from some of our governments or one-time payments to get us through this year, but not next year. So we anticipate that there's some stressors. And at the last EMS Council, we talked about the fact that we have a majority, if not more than 75% of our EMS providers who do not have health insurance or retirement and are working at least 2 jobs, if not 3, 4, or even 5. So otherwise, we're doing pretty well, I think, for the most part. But I think that we all share in a lot of the same concerns. So if anyone has anything that they're doing specifically in a rural environment, please feel free to shed some light on it.
Glass half full.
Aiden, we're gonna be having a statewide conference call to talk about some of those things. You know, as one of those conference calls the Remsco is doing, we will be having another call to talk about those issues.
That's great. I would say that the last remaining thing that we had was economies of scale for shared services. And despite statistical analysis, third party, that shows both a decrease of taxpayer contribution and enhancement of service, unfortunately, when you try to mingle collaboration amongst 10 EMS agencies, we still have yet to succeed. So, we'd be more than willing to also to share our information. We shared it with Wyoming County. I think we touched base with Warren County. We are working with the state, the governor's office. There seems to be multiple agencies throughout or counties, I should say, that are looking into some sort of consolidation, collaboration, but nothing that seems to have taken off wholeheartedly.
Steve, what's the date and time of that conference call again?
The date's not been set yet, but it's on the list.
Oh, I thought that one
Ongoing.
was already on that email that had gone out.
No, the December
We already
date.
did one conference.
We already did one on rural.
Several
areas.
this year.
We've done 6 or 7 of them now.
Oh, okay.
We haven't set the date for the next call yet.
Oh, okay.
And if we have, I just don't know it and I better check.
No. Maybe I,
We just had one 2 weeks ago on ambulance service consolidation.
I think
That
that's the one I'm
was
thinking.
really a
Sorry.
really good call, real good dialogue.
I was there for an hour.
We went for a good hour and a half.
Well, those are recorded, I think.
I don't know.
I'll find out.
How many people were on the phone call?
More than 100 on the last one. It was, some of them, it's been very interesting. Some of the calls have been, you have to pull teeth to get people to talk. For example, the call on quality in EMS,
Yeah, nobody cares about that.
nobody wanted to talk about it, which of course befuddled me, because I
You
thought.
say the C word, though.
But we started consolidation, but it was a lot of people that are, but it wasn't all about, it wasn't a negative call. It was all about people saying, we don't know how to survive and we have to look at new models. And there's a bunch of people around the state that are doing some stuff in new models that's really interesting.
It was a great call.
Yeah.
It was a great call.
Nice job.
Thank you. Rensselaer County, Amy? Kevin is excused, and Schenectady County, Jim?
No report.
Thank you. All right. Any other items from the floor? Have a motion to adjourn? We're gonna adjourn this meeting, and then she's gonna leave, and then Dave's gonna do his, retreat.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
We don't get to.
Can I say something before you do that?
Sure.
Next month's meeting?
Oh, yes, I forgot. I make a
Man, you
motion
let us down.
that we don't, I know.
That's
I'm
actually
sorry.
how to,
I make a motion we don't attend next month and we
don't
attend
attend
to
it?
our family.
Probably shouldn't have it.
We don't attend it, or we just don't have it?
Right, so cancel it.
Take your choice.
Yeah, is that
Go ahead.
You guys can have it, but we're not gonna attend it.
You want a second?
I'll second the motion that we cancel the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we meet in January.
So, tonight, we're gonna spend a little bit of time and, talking about the retreat that the executive committee had earlier in the year. It took us a long time to get this day together. We shared the report from the retreat with everybody. And at the end of the retreat, we talked about next steps, and the group that was there decided that the best thing to do, rather than have us present, is to ask the facilitator who led us through the retreat to give a little bit of a summary of where we're at, so we can think about things to do next. Obviously, one of the things that came out of the retreat was less happening in the back room at the executive